Hey, everybody. It's virtual conversations in the evening. This is a new time for us. We know that Hurricane Zeta kind of tossed us up a little bit, gave us some power outages, but that's okay. Reverend Billy Honor is here with us today, and we're going to talk it up on Monday evening. So we hope that you have an opportunity to drop some questions, share some knowledge, share your feelings. That's why we're here. And so, Reverend Arnold, we thank you for coming by today. I'm trying to find our graphics. There we go. Boom. Now we're in the money. So, um, on Friday, what was that? Thursday, we had the hurricane. Early Thursday morning, late Wednesday night, Hurricane Zeta swept through Georgia, Alabama, my two domains, and shook everything up. And so we were out of power on our normal day of broadcasting. So we decided to pop back in on Monday and hope that we give you some nuggets to help you through this week. So we're excited to be on with you. Virtual Conversations brought to you by The Circuit, which The Circuit is designed to educate, empower, and encourage you to be your best self. I am Candy Kyler, and I am joined by Reverend Billy Honor of the New Georgia Project and of BillyHonor.com, um, who I had the pleasure of meeting many years ago, and he has certainly been a light in my life ever since. And so he's no stranger to virtual conversations, and so he's back today, and we're going to talk about what is most pressing this week, and that is voting. So, Billy, I've gotten 1,001 text messages from my party of choice, the Democratic Party, asking me to make sure that I share with my family and friends to vote. And thankfully, the majority of the people that I know have already voted, whether it was absentee, because Alabama doesn't have early voting. So whether it was absentee or um, early voting in Georgia, we've already voted. But I do know that there are many, many, many thousands of people that haven't yet. And so my job today is just encourage them to still go. No matter how, do we think the lines are still going to be long? I
Yeah.
read today that it's over 58 million people early voted in the United States.
Mhm.
Whereas 4 years ago, it was like half of that.
Right.
That's amazing.
What? It's at 100 million. I think
It's
we're
at 100 million
I think
now?
we're at 96 million probably by
Okay.
now.
Okay. I read that early this morning, like
Hmm.
4 o'clock. Um, so that's amazing. That's even more uh, of a celebration. And it's just important for people, as my aunt says, vote your heart. Um, but then she tries to deter people from voting for a certain vote. And I'm like, wait, you just said vote your heart. So, I mean, we want people to get out there and vote. And that's the only way that we will see change, that we can make change if we're voting together. So, what have you been doing during this election season? Because I know you've been extremely busy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. Always good to be on the circuit and good to be with you. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for providing this forum to speak to the people and encourage the people, and for being willing to talk about civic engagement, and in this case, civic engagement through voting.
Hmm.
And so we appreciate it. I mean, what we do at the New Georgia Project is try to do as much as we can to connect the community, the communities that we serve, which are primarily communities dealing with African American, Latino, um, Asian, and women. We try to connect those communities to all of the things that have to do with how they can get involved in the process of politics and civic work and elections, etc. And so for the past oh man, several weeks we've been texting. So some of those texts you got were probably from us.
Praise the
Uh,
Lord.
and our partners and friends. And then we've also been making calls, and we've hosted some voter registration drives up until the deadline, for sure. I've been mobilizing faith communities across the state through trying to get them to uh, text their members internally in the congregation match their voter files of their actual membership rosters with the voter files so that they can see how their members actually vote. I've been doing that, and we've been trying to get people to fill out voter pledge forms digitally. And then the final thing is we've been recruiting people of faith to be poll chaplains to say, okay,
Mhm.
once we've done all we can do to get people out to vote, how do we protect people's right to vote, right, and
Right.
keep them safe during the process? So that's some of what we've been doing.
So, and one question for you, and my sister just reminded me that I probably read that wrong, that it was probably 98 million. She's such a smarty, but she's probably right. It was
Yeah.
really early when I read the news. But one question I wanted to ask you um, was absentee voting. Now, I know Georgia had some issues with that a few years ago. But as we come to absentee voting, they don't start counting those numbers until tomorrow, those ballots until tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's our rule here in the state. It's not true in all states,
Okay.
but it's true here. So what happens is they will open them and see who sent them, so that when it is that person checks online to see if their ballot was received, they'll be able to
Mhm.
tell them, obviously. But in
Okay.
terms of who they voted for, like
Mhm.
tallying the actual votes, that doesn't start until tomorrow.
Okay. So there was conversation in the news about not having accurate numbers tomorrow. Is that really I mean, I guess we should, with the number of people that early voted, we shouldn't expect accurate numbers tomorrow.
Well, we shouldn't accept final numbers tomorrow. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that what we've been trying to caution people is that patience is probably what you want to start working on right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And saying patience is a virtue, patience is a virtue, patience is a virtue over and over again,
Mhm.
because we might be in this for a while.
Mm.
There are lots of votes that need to be counted, and I'm a part of the coalition of Count Every Vote. We listen. Um, we want every vote counted
Exactly.
before the final decision is made. Either way, I think that's
Mhm.
important. I mean, of course, they can project a winner tomorrow, as the news and the media has done for many years, just based upon what they see is possible according to the electoral calendar. That's their prerogative to
Mhm.
project whatever they want, but their projections are not the decision. You see, what
Mhm.
we're talking about is the actual decision, the actual certification of elections by states,
Mhm.
right? That should not happen until votes are counted, right? And that may take a while because, as you said, the counting doesn't start till tomorrow for a lot of states. And then it depends upon also if there are uh, entities contesting certain parts of the election, right? So
Mhm.
then do we
Mhm.
have to resolve that over the
Mhm.
course of several days? So, for instance, here in Georgia, we have until our electorals who get to pledge who they vote for in the
Mhm.
electoral college for Georgia, they don't have to pledge until around December the 15th. So essentially, some of us have been preparing to be in this from tomorrow until December 15th before we actually know what the deal is, or December
Mhm.
8th, depending upon.
Okay. Um, if I'm not mistaken, there are certain states that they're saying if certain people win those states, then we can count it pretty much as done. And it's like Florida, is it Idaho, Iowa, Florida, Iowa, and another
Ohio, you mean, and like,
Ohio,
so,
and what's the
so,
other third state? They said three.
yeah. Yeah, so there's always pathways to victory for candidates to get to 270, right?
Mhm.
And usually there's a Democratic path and there's a Republican path, just based
Mhm.
upon how the map usually shakes down. So the late Tim Russert, um, who passed, who used to be the host of Meet the Press, used to always say it's Florida, it's Florida, it's Florida, right?
Mhm.
Uh, because really, no one has really become president without winning um, Florida recently, or Ohio, right? And so those become, every time, those are like battleground states that could go either way, and they become really important most times. So Pennsylvania, though, most people feel right. This based upon what they're projecting will happen, that Pennsylvania actually will become the pivotal state right now in terms of deciding things. The wrench in all of that is Georgia. That's why President Obama, former President Obama, is was here today, and Kamala Harris, Vice Presidential nominee, is in Gwinnett County here today, and President Trump was here yesterday because Georgia is the new battleground state.
Hmm.
And so if Trump doesn't win Georgia, it's a hard path for him at least to see how he gets to 270. And
Okay.
so it just depends. Arizona's in the mix, right? North Carolina. And so it just depends. We just have to see what happens.
Okay. Okay. So it's a lot to learn, but hopefully this will help kind of calm some people's nerves, because people are getting a little frantic and even anxious. So I remember 4 years ago when we were going through this, my current boss at the time, we were having our one-on-one, and he said it was the day after the election, and he said, "So how are you feeling?" And I said, "I feel fine." And he said, "I mean about the election," and I said, I'm okay because, I just feel like God is the same God regardless of who's president. But what I do know that there are people that really get into politics a lot more than I do. And some people are worried, people are anxious, people are stressed and unsure of what's going to happen after this week. What is some advice that you could give to those people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one word of advice is that uh, politics and elections affect many things, but they don't affect all things, right?
Hmm.
Um, that means that there is definitely a reason to be aware and focused and patched in on what's going on because I do believe that this is probably the most consequential election in most of our lifetimes, and
Yeah.
so it's not. I think it makes good sense to be concerned about what happens. On the other hand, though, we don't want to lose our sanity. We don't want to put. My grandmother used to say, "Put all your eggs in one basket."
Right.
Uh, like some of our eggs are in this basket, right? As it pertains to this, but not all the eggs, right?
Mhm.
There are some things that are gonna be okay even after this, no matter what
Mhm.
the outcome.
Right.
And one of those things should be um, our sense of love for ourselves and our neighbors, and self care, and
Mhm.
and being willing to model in our own lives that we may not see in public life or in politics. Like all of that is what's in our control, right?
Mhm.
So when you go to
Mhm.
therapy, one of the ways they help you to manage stress is they tell you control your controllables,
Right.
right? And so I think that's what I would say is you
Mhm.
got to control your controllables as we all enter into this uncertain time.
Right. Find those things that you can control and deal with that, and the rest you leave it up to the process.
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
and it definitely, as you explained, there is a process that we have to
Hmm.
go.
Sure, sure. And then, another thing I learned going through therapy myself is knowing the difference between a real and perceived threat. So,
Mhm.
not spending time being worried over something that hasn't happened or
Mhm.
probably won't happen, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and dealing with what is before us and what the reality is, right? And
Yeah.
saying, okay, am I allowing myself to be decentered based upon something that's real or based upon something I think's gonna happen, right?
Right. Right.
And so there are lots of scenarios that we could play out around this election, post election, and all of that. For some of us, it's important for us to do that work because we're trying to organize and protect and all of that. But I
Mhm.
would say for most people, uh, just take it as it comes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, just across the board with a lot of things, but especially with the heaviness that has come with the election, and people are, glued to the televisions, um, just trying to figure out what's going to happen, and then thinking beyond the what ifs. I actually went to the grocery store today to make sure that I was stocked up in case there is some buffoonery and foolishness going on in
Yeah,
the streets, which
yeah,
may happen. And on either side, there just may be some very stressful situations that may turn violent. What do you think
yeah.
about that?
It's that's one of the scenarios. It's totally possible. Um, I've been in conversation with law enforcement today on several levels in terms of what we do preparing for here in the city of Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. And I think the sense is nobody really knows what's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of the demonstrations that you're talking about would happen organically, right? That means
Mhm,
people would be looking at what's going on, not be happy, and then just leave their house and go into the streets
mhm,
in an unplanned way. There are some planned demonstrations for sure,
mhm.
but those really aren't the ones
That
that
we're
we are
worried
concerned
about.
about the most.
Right.
The ones we're concerned about is the ones that are unplanned. And this will
Mhm,
be different from what happened this summer. You know, it was easy to categorize what happened this summer is young black folks and young folks, period, just in the streets with no direction and blah 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 blah. And the way the media categorized it and tearing up people's stuff and all of this looting, and it was easy to categorize because these were young people from communities that most people don't interact with in a lot of
right.
cases. But this would be
Mhm,
different because this will be a large this would be a large representation of the American public. I'm
yeah.
talking from all walks of life will be in the streets, and so um, it won't be it won't be about a particular racial group. This will be about true civic unrest. If in
Mhm,
fact um, one person declares himself the victor, and people feel like that it wasn't justly done.
mhm. Lately I've been thinking a lot about that movie, Purge, The Purge. And I think I saw maybe the first one some years ago, but I've been thinking a lot about it. And um, there I don't know, it's something scary about what may happen that makes me think about that movie. Just, like Robin just posted and says, I think that, people are concerned about random acts of racism. And I also think there may be some acts of, frustration that comes out. So from what I hear, now I do not live on Rodeo Drive, and I didn't see this for myself, but they have already started boarding up some of their windows. And I suspect some of the other businesses have done the same in fear that people will react to what happens this week.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear it's happening in New York City. Lots of boarding up a bit. It's happened all over for sure. People are taking what I think is requisite caution. And part of this, let's just keep it 100. The president of the United States has put out enough talking points to
Mhm,
make enough people feel like the type of peaceful transitions and uh, fair elections to the point of there being a concession. Hey, we ran a good race. You win. I'm moving on to something else now. He's put
mhm.
out enough talking points to make people think that that's not how he's going to approach this.
Right, right.
And so, because of that, his supporters, those who are on the extreme fringe,
Mhm,
um, have prepared themselves, at least from what we think, have prepared themselves to sort of defend his cause by saying, hey, this was a rigged
mhm,
election or whatever the case may be. And there's a counter reaction to that. And the counter reaction is, okay, if you all gonna be there, we will too, right? And it
mhm,
sort of
mhm,
sets this stage of what could be, as you were referencing, a sort of I hate to couch it in terms of race because I really wanna be clear here that listen, this will be a rainbow coalition of people in the streets
mm,
opposing this if something like this were to happen, right?
mhm, mhm,
And I won't be clear about that, right? and most of the people I've heard from who are upset ain't black. The truth, let's just keep it.
Tell the
Most of
truth.
most of the black people kind of like, hey, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, this sort of thing. Like there's a sort of
Mhm,
reservation because of what our skepticism of the system, period.
mhm,
But a
mhm,
lot of these white folks, now they're the concerned ones. They're the
mhm,
ones that's concerned and upset, you know,
mhm.
because this is a level of disenfranchisement they ain't used to.
Right.
It's like you're gonna take our, not count our votes and not hear our voice. I mean, so I just the racial part to this is that there are white militias that are
Mhm.
promising things, and we don't know who will be the targets of their animosity or intimidation. That's the racial part of it.
Right, right. Um, there's a question out there that says, "What about white supremacists trying to run Biden's bus off the road recently?" That was in the news, and so people are doing go to that extreme. You know, it's no telling what they may even try to
Yeah.
do to us common folk.
Sure. I mean, we don't know that we do not know, right? So
Mhm,
we had a briefing from the Southern Poverty Law Center who tracks these hate groups. And we got
mhm,
like 3 or 4 hate groups here in Georgia, like QAnon and the 3%ers. And these are groups that operate, they have constituencies, and they've been talking and monitoring things. A lot of times it's all wolf tickets. They end up talking about what they're gonna do and they don't end up doing much. Or even if they show up, that's pretty much what they do is just kind of show up to make a statement, but they don't really want no smoke.
mhm,
um,
mhm,
but as I said to some other folks, it only really takes one lone actor in this case, one really deranged person to sit on top of a building or do something and shoot or whatever to really send things into the wrong place. And I really think that's the bigger threat, right?
right.
Is some lone actor just going way too far and acting on the worst impulses. And so we don't say these things to make people fearful, especially the day before election. We want people to go out and we want people to vote. That's the most important thing. But I do
Mhm,
think we just want people to have vigilance, right? And just be aware of your surroundings and what's happening, and report any suspicious activity. And let's just hope for the best, and be wise out there.
yeah. And I think we also, as Christians, we say we're praying, we're praying. I've seen prayers, going around on social media, which is great, but we also have to not only pray, but we have to walk the walk.
And
um
watch.
right. Watch and pray. Watch and pray and walk the walk.
That's
Just
right.
because some people are, acting up, it doesn't mean that we have to retaliate.
Mhm.
But like you said, watch and then be mindful of what needs to happen next. Um, Make sure you call law enforcement. Um, some people have guns. There are gun laws in each state. We have people watching from many different states. I can't quote all the gun laws of what happens on your property and so on and so forth. But just be careful. Um, be careful about what you're doing. And like you said, don't get so far into your head that you're thinking about the what ifs versus where you are right now. What can you control? And rest in that.
Mhm.
So we
Absolutely.
want to push people definitely to the polls tomorrow. If you did not get to early vote, I know some people had early voting up until today. In Georgia, we finished on the 30th on Friday. But there's early voting in certain states up until today. If you didn't vote prior to Tuesday, Tuesday is the day that you have to go. Tomorrow, November 3rd. Make plans. There may be long lines. Take a snack, take some water, charge your phone. Um, I really want to encourage and push the DJs to set up some time where they're, on Facebook running shows. I know people do it like at lunchtime on Fridays, but how about lunchtime on Tuesday? So while people are standing in the line, that they're engaged, they're having fun. Be respectful of the people that are there. We are in COVID season. Make sure that you're, keeping your distance from people. Wear your mask. There's just so many things we have to be mindful of right now. Do you think there's anything Like, how has COVID played into this voting season right now?
Yeah. Well, that's why we have so many people who voted by mail ballot.
Mhm,
Because they most of those people just didn't want to go out and interact um, with people at the polls because of COVID. And so I think that's one reason. So I think the early voting numbers have been driven up because of COVID.
mhm.
The other way that COVID is affected is we have these drop boxes now for absentee ballots, which I think we should keep.
Yeah.
Just moving forward, that's one of
Mhm,
the COVID advancements, as I call it.
mhm.
That's been a good thing. I mean, it's pushed us um, to be creative in ways we should have been in many ways before. That's in terms of the voting and the church and all the rest. And so
Yeah,
drop boxes is a good thing. That was because of COVID. The other thing is these. I really think these mass arenas being used as polling places, even though Phillips Arena won't be one on election day. Um, but using it during early voting, I don't know that that would have happened if it weren't
right.
for COVID.
Mhm,
And so I'm happy about that. I think on the negative side, um, so there are some groups like ours and others that are used to doing mass mobilization by events and other things like that, and not being able to gather people in spaces more than small groups just for their own safety
mhm.
has made it challenging for groups that traditionally do get out the vote efforts. And so I think that's a part of it. The other thing is because since you can't gather people in public, you got to text them, like you talk about all those text messages you get.
Mhm,
Well, then that
mhm,
also makes that type of advocacy less effective because
mhm.
after about the 15th or so text, even if you were trying to be a good sport and respond, you just can't keep up most
Yeah.
people. And after a while, you just stop paying attention to them.
Mhm,
And so that's also a negative, especially for the people who volunteering to do the texting, who
mhm.
want to have conversations with people, and they're getting ignored or whatever. And so anyway, I think COVID's definitely been relevant, for sure. But the other thing is the number one driver of how people are voting in terms of for the presidency is about COVID. There's a whole COVID coalition
Yeah,
of people, rural voters and urban voters, people who've come together who just concerned about how the COVID situation has been handled by the government. And
yeah.
so a lot of people are voting on that, more
Mhm,
than anything else.
mhm, mhm. And my sister just reminded me that we need to report any issues, any voter suppression when you're at the polls tomorrow. Where should they report that? I don't know if there's a national number, but I know you could tell us where to report that in Georgia.
Yeah, the national number is 1-866 the vote. 1-866 the vote. So
Hmm.
that's the national number that you're going to see all over the place. Probably have. But our number here in Georgia, there's a bunch that you could use. I would just tell people if you're here in Georgia, download our app, the New Georgia Project app, and when you go into the app, you can report incidents. But it's absolutely important if you see something happening to report it, especially if it's happening to you. If you are being denied the right to vote for whatever reason, you definitely want to get some advocacy on your end. In most states, like our state, you can always ask for a provisional ballot if you experience any challenges at the polling precinct, so that at least you don't have to leave without having cast your ballot.
Hmm.
And so, 1-866 the vote though is the national number,
Okay.
and then our app is the New Georgia Project. If you're in Georgia,
The new georgiaproject.org, right?
yeah, that's our website. Yeah, and then
Hmm.
the app is in the App Store, just New Georgia Project. You'll see it purple; it'll come up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome. That's good to know. And what about, some of the elderly people, which I was hoping that most of them had either absentee voted or gone early. And I was talking to my mom, and she said some of her friends are waiting till tomorrow.
yeah,
And all of them are not, in the best of health. We don't
yeah,
want to deter them from, long lines and so forth. I know in Georgia, you can go to the front of the line if you're like 75 years or older.
that's correct.
Um,
Yeah, but the thing is, it's you can do it during non-peak times. in certain counties.
Oh,
So you
okay.
have to see what the rule is in the county. So like in Fulton County, between 9 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon, they can skip the line.
Mhm.
But between like 7 and 9, and then 3:30 to whenever the polls close are considered peak times. And so in Fulton County, they can't skip the line
Okay.
during those times. So um, we advocated to try to get that changed because I don't know anyone standing in those lines who has a problem with 75-year-old plus persons going
Going
ahead of
ahead.
them.
Right.
You just got to be a horrible person, but most
Mhm.
people don't mind. So if we just hope that most counties would make that a rule, but I don't think that changed. So I think you have to check to make sure what times they can skip. But there is a designated time usually they can skip the line.
Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's good to know. This is like a surreal time. It's very serious, and I hope that people are taking it seriously. If you're 18 years of old or older, I hope you have already registered to vote so that you can go out and vote tomorrow. Um, I'm not gonna say anxious, but we'll see how everything pans out in the coming weeks. And we have to stay calm, as Billy said. Only think about the things that you have in your that you can control, that are at your reach, and the rest we can't stress about it.
Mhm.
Um, be careful in these streets. We
Mhm.
don't know, what's going to
Yeah,
happen. If
yeah.
you're part of an organized um, rally, we pray your safety. If you're not, please don't go out and do anything foolish. And like you said, be watchful. Definitely be watchful for what's around you. Any other parting words for people?
Yeah, I just say we have a lot to celebrate. As we
Mm,
started with, there are going to be, for us all over, probably 100 million people have early voted. um, that's a celebration no matter what happens tomorrow. People have showed up, and they've shown out in terms of their participation in the process, and we should all applaud ourselves for the
yeah,
way in which we've shown up. A lot of people talk about voting and all this, and American habits of voting, but let me tell you something. A lot of these countries that have higher numbers of people voting, that's because it's compulsory voting. It's actually against the law not to vote in a lot of those countries. So, like
mhm,
Belgium and others, everybody's required to vote by law.
mhm,
Here, we obviously have choice voting, and so when you consider how often we ask people to go vote on local level and then state level and federal level, um, our turnout is people are persistent because we ask them to do a lot.
mhm,
In a lot of countries, they only people only ask to vote every 4 years. Period. They get to
mhm.
vote for everybody every 4 years, but we ask people to go to the polls over and over again every year, sometimes multiple. And so, given all of that, we should applaud ourselves and not get weary in well doing. Because tomorrow may not conclude this electoral season as much as some
Exactly.
people want it to be over.
Mhm.
We may end up in this for a couple more months, right? Um, there'll be runoffs in a lot of states. There probably is going to be one very important runoff here in Georgia. And so, even if the presidential election is concluded fairly quickly, it still won't end the electoral season for many states and many of us. So, let's just see it through, and know that this is about what kind of country we want to live in for the present future. And so,
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for dropping in
yeah,
and talking to the people. Our prayer was that something that was said today will help you and encourage you to do what you need to do to vote and be calm after you voted through this little storm that we may be going through over the next month. So, make sure that you don't stress over things that you don't have control over. Be sure if you have not voted that you go out and vote tomorrow. There are millions of websites in your state that will help you find your polling place. And I'm just believing that everyone already knows. I'm that person. I just really believe that everyone knows where they're going to vote and they're going to vote tomorrow. if they haven't already voted. All right. Thank you, Billy Honor, for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. Remember, I'm dropping the 866, the vote number. If you experience any type of voter suppression, I dropped that number in the comments. And also, we have one more question. What's the benefit of voting a straight party ticket?
I think that depends on the voter.
Okay.
It's kind of like ranked choice voting. It depends on the person, how you prefer that. Um, yeah, it really depends on the voter. I mean, I don't want to turn this too much into a partisan conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but it depends. It depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people just gonna that's fine with them. Like they're down for their squad, the
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party, and like whoever those candidates are, like they're like this is my team, and I'm good with it. Like
Right.
and I mean that's a conversation to be had.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are other ways to approach it too, and so, but I think it depends on the voter and what your values are and what's most
Mm-hmm.
important to you. I think
Okay.
that's what I would say.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Those that are watching, be sure you encourage someone to vote tomorrow. Be sure that you are taking care of yourself and that we're praying for a favorable outcome for the American people. All right. Have a good night. Enjoy your Monday and don't watch too much news tomorrow, please.
I'll think. Yeah, okay, that's gonna happen. I'm sorry, Candy. They're gonna be watching this. It's every minute of
They
it. It's
are
must see TV.
CNN, Fox News. They're going to, and guess who won't be? I refuse.
I hear you. I hear
All
you.
right. Thanks Billy, again for joining us. Good night, everyone.